Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the MtG, and today we are going to continue a deck evolution. Recently, in the only Bloomburrow constructed event, I was able to pretty thoroughly test a version 1 of the Orzhov Bats deck, and well, to be frank, it performed pretty darn well in the micro meta, winning 8 games out of 14 for a roughly 57% win rate. I think that is far more than enough to consider moving this on to a version 2, and that is what we are going to be taking a look at today. A deck still built primarily from a draft archetype, but continuing its evolution and potential investment against the broader standard meta. This season, I'm hanging out with the friends here in Bloomburrow, and, well, I don't really look any different. Apparently, I'm always in beast mode. And if you want your Magic the Gathering experience on and off Arena to be in beast mode too, make sure to check out my Patreon page, because, let's be honest, not everything makes it to YouTube. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. Alright, so let's take a look at this version 2 Bats deck, and I've taken the liberty of organizing the cards basically by relative cost. Starting over here in the first column, these are uncommon wild cards that I think are going to be pretty worthwhile in this deck, and I think you're going to feel good about spending these regardless of the direction this deck ultimately takes. That being 3 copies of Rune Lurker Bat, a total of 4 copies of Deep Cavern Bat. Even if you weren't around last year, you do have 2 of these from your 2025 starter collection, and then a single copy of Ellis Ilcord, the Sadistic Pilgrim, a 2/2 Death Touch legendary creature that gives you those nice life gain opponent life loss triggers every time a creature dies or enters play. Very solid card that fits very nicely into this, and actually in its own right opens up some other lines of play, like a very nice budget brawl deck. This second column is mostly the Bat synergistic commons and uncommons from Bloomburrow. I did include 1 copy each of the appropriately colored villages. If you notice here, we're running a lot of 3s and 2-ofs on this. We're also running Feed the Cauldron from the starter collection because it gives you a food synergy. I think it fits pretty nicely into this. We are running Patchwork Banner as a 1-of, mostly for testing purposes. In a 2-color deck, this might not be necessary, but I do think it's worth testing overall, both from a ramp perspective as well as a Bat Lord style card. Some of these higher cost things like the Dive Duo or the Starseer Mentor may ultimately end up getting cut for a lower, faster curve. Similar, the Waxwing Witness might not make the final cut. And ultimately, with a lot of these cards, what we might end up doing is cutting 1 particular card in order to have more consistent play sets of others. From there, we've got the rares that synergize particularly well with this deck. In fact, they're both the signature rares for this deck. I am suggesting 1 copy of Lunar Convocation and 2 copies of Zoraline Cosmos Collar. I've seen various builds out there that are running sometimes 3 and 4 copies of this, but we're trying to keep it budget. Both of these cards are available through the jump-in packet, and of course Cosmos Collar is legendary, so running 2 seems like a fair place to start. We don't necessarily want to have dead copies in our hand. This card also happens to be our major recursion for our 1 and 2 and 3 drop creatures. So pretty important piece, so finding the right balance ultimately is going to be important. From here, we've got 3 cards from your new player experience, particularly rares. Sanguine Evangelist not only gives you a semi Lord ability through Battle Cry, but of course it also makes bat tokens. Gumdrop Poisoner synergizes very well with the Lifegain capability, as well as being a lifelink source itself. Also, it Tempt with Treats can create a food token to kind of time delay a Lifegain trigger as well. Roaming Throne, I think, needs no introduction to this season. Getting multiple triggers on some of these bat things is going to be pretty good, especially since several of them only allow it to trigger one time per turn. So Roaming Throne is your only way in some cases to get multiples on those triggers. From here, we've got a couple of things that I think might be worth wildcards, but if you don't want to invest in these on day one of the version 2 deck, I could certainly understand. The rare dual land Restless Fortress gives you all of those man land benefits, post board wipe viability, surprise blocker. It also generates life gain and life loss triggers for your opponent. Obviously, that fits very nicely into the deck. From here, we've got Alkazat's Deepest Betrayal. I know this is a mythic, and I don't often recommend using your mythic wildcards because I know for a free-to-play player, you might only get 4 mythic wildcards your entire first year. But a 4/4 flying lifelink Bat God fits pretty nicely into this deck. It also fits very nicely into a potential budget-friendly mono black discard deck, and in this case, if you do get your opponent to discard, it creates bat tokens, and of course all of these gods from Ixalan, they don't die, they just come back around, so it gives you a nice recursion. Honestly, I think this is the best black mythic card in rotation, and of course that comes with a heavy weighted statement because there are multiple very good black mythics at the moment. From here, we've got a few cards that are in your collection if you were around last year. Caves of Coilus gives you an on-demand life loss trigger for when you need it. Scoured Barrens gives you a highly controllable life gain trigger that you can do. And of course, Gix not only allows you to draw cards, but it does so by paying life. So it's another one of those abilities that can allow you to lose life in a controlled manner when you need to, and give you potential card advantage. From here, the land is going to be pretty straightforward. You've got your basics, plains and swamps, and depending upon how this mix of cards changes over time and its color diversities, those counts will, of course, need to be adjusted. Shadowy Backstreet is the dual land for Orzhov from the Murders at Karlov Manor. Everybody has one. It's in here. Cavern of Souls fits into any tribal creature style. The vast majority of cards in this deck have bat as a creature type, so this is going to be easy work. And when it's not casting bats, it still does produce colorless mana. And if you notice, most of our non-bat things don't have multiple pips. Probably the one example is LSF Core. And hey, if you can't make a black and a white mana in this deck, you've done something pretty wrong. Of course, also Fabled Passage. This is an older version, but of course this is currently in circulation as a rare from Bloomburrow. I don't know that I'd spend a wild card on it right away, but certainly by the end of the season, if you haven't acquired one or more of these, it might be time to consider expending a wild card there. And Thran Portal, this is a card that I have been recommending basically since it was printed, because it is very similar to the Pain Lands as far as mana fixing, but does fit into any 2 or multiple color strategy deck, as opposed to the traditional Pain Lands like Cave of Coilus, which of course are tied to a specific color pair. Thran Portal also gives you another controllable on-demand life loss trigger in those instances when you need it. For the sake of brevity in this video, I decided not to include any of the actual play footage, but that is all available for you
actually over an hour of play footage with the version 1 deck through the link in the description. So if you're looking for that or want to see it firsthand, definitely check that out. And before we go, of course, I always want to thank my entire Patreon community for supporting not just my passion, but the community at large. And in particular, this time around, I wanted to recognize Searing Blaze and Kenny F. They are coming up on their 1-year anniversary of support. Thank you all. Thank you guys. I could not do this without you. And of course, let me leave you with some suggestions for your next step here on the channel.